Welcome back, everybody. That just shook my whole desk. We're back, and with the month of October rapidly approaching, we all know what's right around the corner. All right, drum roll, everyone. Inktober. So, a lot of people like to keep, sketchbooks for Inktober, and that way they have everything kind of in one place. And I don't know if it's what everyone's doing it for. It's just like a more of a art YouTuber thing. Either way, I see it online, so I'm assuming that there's at least a decent amount of people out there going, I want to get a sketchbook for Inktober. I don't think that's like an unreasonable assumption to make. So initially, full disclosure, this was supposed to be just a comparison between the Moleskine sketchbook and the Illo sketchbook. But this wouldn't be a Ryan Kirby video unless I overdid it by 10,000 and decided to buy every sketchbook available on Amazon and reviewed them. No, that's not what I did. But I did actually get quite a lot of sketchbooks. I guess not a lot, but quite a few options for sketchbooks here. And my personal sketchbook is actually not on me. It's in my car. So you can't see what I personally use. But I am going to be personally using probably all of these, or otherwise it's a waste of money. But anyway, so I thought, what would be the best sketchbook for if I want to do Inktober this year with a sketchbook, or just in general for my pen and ink sketches? What should I use? I have a pen and ink book that I use. I'm presently pleased with it, but it's kind of small and doesn't have a lot of pages. So what are the other options out there? So today we are taking a look specifically with Inktober in mind, and I'm not going to be able to fit all these in frame, so I'm just going to kind of move them over to the side over here. The Moleskine sketchbook in size. Hey, you can actually see the whole thing now in frame, sort of. Yeah, I guess you can, sort of. The Moleskine sketchbook. The Illo sketchbook. I should move these out of the way. Ooh, I'm bumping stuff. The Illo sketchbook. Or the Leda Art Supply sketchbook. As you can see there. Or the Travelogue sketchbook. I don't know what else to call it. I think it's Travelogue. Yeah, but this is actually made by Speedball, or distributed by Speedball. Sketchbook. Or the limited edition Plum Chester. Some of you might recognize this from the Inktober Art Snacks subscription box. Or this is kind of like the wild card. The Koh-I-Noor Hidden Wire sketchbook with smooth Bristol. So really, what options are you looking for in a sketchbook? Obviously, it needs to hold multiple pages. That's kind of like the basic requirement for, a book. Other than that, what I kind of really look for in a sketchbook with inking in mind, or really is the same thing I look in any paper. I want to make sure that the ink's not going to bleed through the page, obviously. I want to make sure that the ink's going to sit nice on top of the page. I want to make sure that the page durability, the surface of the paper, is nice and durable in case I want to use my nibs. And when I do, is the ink going to bleed on that? So we're going to take a look at some of the more obscure options first, into the more popular options, and kind of see what do I think about them. And we're going to kind of leave the Moleskine and the Illo for the end. And spoiler alert, I'm not saving the best for last. Dun, dun, dun. So, I don't know where I want to start this video out. So, man, this is going to be like a weird way of spoiling all the fun. So, right off the bat, we have our Leda Art Supply sketchbook. And these sketchbooks kind of have a common theme. I really went for what's popular right now, which is kind of the Traveler's sketchbook. So, just like pretty much all of them, except for the Koh-I-Noor Bristol sketchbook, you have a cover with an elastic closure. Take a look at this with the little paper wrappy thing. We'll take that off. And it has a little thing about the company there. Move that off to the side for now. And take a quick look at this sketchbook. Although this is like it has kind of like a rubbery texture to it, it is a soft cover, as you can see. So that actually cuts down weight a little bit. But despite being a soft cover, opening it is like on the first page, you can see that it like definitely springs back. It's springy. So I'm going to have to crease that. But when I crease it, it does lay flat. The only downside is because it is a soft cover, with it laying flat, there's still, I'm shaking the whole thing, but there's a lot of give there. So for you left-handed people, that might be a problem on the first few pages. And inversely, as you get to the back, a problem for the right-handed people, which I can attest to, because I did test the paper in each of these sketchbooks, and I tested it at the back of the sketchbook. But this paper is wonderfully smooth and a nice off-white cream colored. It's moderately thick. I say moderately because I've definitely felt thicker paper before, but it is definitely thick enough to hold up to pen and ink without giving too many problems. And let's see how the pages lay relatively flat. Yeah, it does require some encouragement, though. You can kind of see, no matter where I'm kind of really flipping through, that for the most part, it lays relatively flat. As we get towards the center of the sketchbook, it becomes much more enjoyable to use. Let's talk about performance. Oh, by the way, it has a pocket, just like you'll see many of these do. So here's my little test page. I tested all of these with the following art supplies: Microns, Copic multi-liners, Staedtler pigment liners, Otto graphic roller ball pen things that were recommended by a subscriber, Zig Kuretake things, the Kuretake Fude Gokochi pen thing, my personal Lamy Safari that I use every day with Noodler's black, bulletproof black to be specific, Ultra Draw ink with a Hunt 102, Pilot Drafting ink, Eon Vortex ink, Kaime Drawing Sol K, Super Black, and Dr. P.H. Martin's High Carb, the Black Star High Carb. Then I also tested the Kuretake Fude pen, the Pentel Fude pen, ink wash with the Eon Vortex, some Copic marker, and some watercolor. Now, what I noticed about this paper is it holds up to ink extremely, extremely well. Now, certain inks did have some bleeding. The Otto graphic liners did bleed on the page. It's a thinner ink because it's a rollerball, so it did bleed. And of course, Ultra Draw ink bleeds on pretty much everything, so it did bleed. But that's about all the bleeding we experienced. Copic's worked wonderfully smooth, but because it is a thinner page, there is some bleeding, and as you can see, it definitely bled through the page. So one of those, definitely stick a piece of paper behind it, and that's pretty much true with all sketchbooks. Watercolor works pretty well on this, but I wouldn't recommend it for anything more than a light wash because this is thin paper and it is very prone to buckling. But the Eon Vortex little wash or beta coloring, spotting the blacks, worked wonderfully smooth. And that white spot there is actually not the fault of the Eon Vortex ink or the paper of the sketchbook. It's just simply because I didn't fill in my blacks very well. So that's the Leda art supply. All in all, despite the paper being a little bit more thin, and the soft cover versus hardcover thing is kind of weird because this does feel great in the hand being a soft cover, and it kind of gives it, I don't know, there's something I like about the feel of this, but in practicality using, unless you need something that's lighter and a little bit more flexible to stuff in a like overly large jean pocket or something, I probably would have liked to seen hardcover on this, because trying to draw on a soft cover, especially if I was like on a park bench or something, would be a little more difficult than I would like. Next, we are going to look at the Plumchester limited edition square sketchbook, also a traveler style sketchbook. It features a elastic closure, pardon me, which keeps everything nice and tidy, with a paper sleeve thing. Now this one is fancy and has a InkTober embezzled and whatever. It's not embroidered, but it's embellished cover, and the cover is made out of a faux leather. The pages are nice and bright. They are smooth with a moderate tooth to them. Nothing crazy, but enough for pencils to be very pleasant to use. It lays down flat very well. That's kind of thread bound like a traveler's notebook or a Moleskine. So it's going to lay very flat. It's hardcover, so it has all the support that your hands need. And of course, like many other traveler's notebooks, has a little bookmark thingy, so you know where you're at in your sketchbook. Now, I was really excited about this because I was like, hey, it's not one of those super fancy things. And it says InkTober on the front, so this would be the perfect InkTober sketchbook, right? No. Despite everything it had going for it, this sketchbook kind of let me down. It kind of feathers the line with any ink. It is a very loose-grained paper. It feels like it has a lot of soft wood, not like a hardwood pulp, but a lot of softwood in the pulp of this paper. So it is a very absorbent paper. The surface of the paper is not very durable. All in all, I was not pleased with the performance of this paper for inks, which is weird considering this came from a subscription box where they're supposed to like calibrate the supplies to work well together, and it says friggin' InkTober on the front. But I will say, if you're using like microns and stuff like that, you obviously can get satisfactory results out of it. Like, obviously that's not going to be a problem. Watercolor, yeah, you can do it. Should you? No. As you can see, that like the watercolor is like got that like freckly little thing. Like it looks like there's a texture like to the paper, but I mean there kind of is. But that's not what that's from. That's just the watercolor reacting poorly with the paper. Copics worked pretty well, but it actually bled through the page more than the thinner paper did, just kind of telling you about the absorbency of this paper. Like if you use Copics on this a lot, you're going to be going through some Copic ink pretty quick. But that said, this seems like a really nice paper for pencils, oddly enough. Like it has the right amount of tooth for me for doing pencil sketches to where I know I'm not going to be smudging my pencil everywhere. But then if I want to, I can go in with a fine liner and ink some stuff. Don't use this with nibs. Pretty much all the ink bled on this except like the Eon Vortex and the High Carb. The Speedball Super Block was terrible. The Ultra Draw was absolutely horrendous. The Fude brushes had moderate performance. The Kuretake Fude pen definitely performed better. So unfortunately, even like the aesthetics and how this feels in the hand is super, super nice. The paper, I just would have really liked to see a better paper in this. And that's honestly something, just sketchbook paper. I've always had a really big issue with like taking something that's marketed as a sketchbook and trying to ink it. And I've never been happy with the results from the paper. Here we have I believe this is the Travelogue handbook journal. I don't really know what this is or who makes it. It's just this handbook journal company. I believe it's called Travelogue. If I'm wrong, I guess, sorry. Again, like other traveler notebooks, this has a elastic enclosure. This one works extremely well. It's very tight, as you can hear. We'll open this up. Speedball advertisement. Yes, Travelogue. Okay, I was right. Thank God. I thought I was going crazy. It's manufactured by Global Arts, distributed by Speedball. Take this little paper thing out. Now this paper is, again, cream colored. This has the most texture out of any of the paper I've tested for this particular test. It has a very cold press feel to it. So using pencils on this would be fantastic. But, oh yeah, by the way, instead of having it in your standard pocket, this has a like little pouch thing that opens up and, hold on. What's this? Am I going to break something? Does this come out, or is this just part of... Okay, it's just part of how it's manufactured. It has a pocket thing there. You can see my test page there. But despite the tooth on this, this is actually the best performing paper with ink. The downside is because it does have such like a highly textured surface that fine liners, you will see the texture. With brush pens, you will see the texture. But it worked amazing with watercolor washes. Like, holy crap. It really did work extremely well. Also has a bookmark thingy there. Worked great with Copics. Worked great with every ink. This paper is actually really, really good. It worked great with all the inks. Moderate bleeding, but actually still usable with the Ultra Draw ink, which impressed me. If this paper was smoother, this would be by far my favorite sketchbook in the world. It's a cloth cover, hardcover. This is much smaller, and I don't know if I think this actually might be one of the larger ones they offer, but don't quote me on that. I'm going to have Amazon links in the description where you can purchase all of these, by the way, since I always get yelled at for not making things easy for my viewers because, hey, I had to do the work, so can you. But this one actually performed very, very well, extremely well. Now on to, actually, you know what? I'll do the wild card now. The wild card was something I purchased because I was like, most likely this is what I'm going to end up using for InkTober. This is the Koh-I-Noor Smooth Bristol Hidden Wire Sketchbook, Dome Lock technology. Don't know what that means, but it has in and out pages, which is freaking amazing. I love it. So it opens up, spiral bound. It still lays nicely. Has an area for your information. This is smooth Bristol. This Koh-I-Noor Bristol is so extremely smooth. I love drawing on it. It's I actually have some pads of the same Bristol in various sizes, and I've been meaning to do a video on it, and I haven't gotten around to it, unfortunately. But it's extremely smooth paper, so smooth, the best smooth. It's just a fantastic paper to work on. Let's go to the back here and look at our test page. So here's the test page. Everything worked relatively well. Almost everything. There's a few problem children out there like Ultra Draw. I don't know if you're going to be able to see that. I can't see if this is in frame or not. So hopefully you can see it. But Ultra Draw bleeds on a lot of paper, and it bleeds on a lot of paper I like. Unfortunately, I really like Ultra Draw ink, so I tested on everything because when I find that combination, boy, am I happy. Now, a common thing that I've saw across all these is the Oto graphic liners bleed on everything. The ink is very thin on it, so it kind of falls in the same category as Ultra Draw ink, which is, if you really love the Oto graphic liners, use them on like Strathmore paper. It's one of the few papers, or Canson foundation bristles, one of the few that actually hold up to it without really any feathering of the ink lines. Other than that, everything else worked amazing. Copic, I mean, it blended perfectly. The Vortex works on everything. Watercolor, light watercolor washes worked fantastically. It's a great paper. I really like this. And the nice thing about this particular thing is it does have perforated. So this is actually a 7x10. Now the 7x10 is actually from the perforation. So you can tear the paper out, or you can use the in and out feature, which does take a little effort, but it is fantastic, which is the pages actually lift out as so, and then you just kind of push them back in just like that. I've done this when I do the full review of this paper. I've actually already done it, but I haven't done the video for it yet, but I've done the full testing. That's how I tested the page. I actually removed it from the book of paper and then tested it and placed it back in. So that's my wild card, and we'll go on to the next now. The highly anticipated portion of this, which is the Illo versus the Moleskine. And we're going to start off with the Moleskine. We're going to save the most anticipated one for the end. So this is the Moleskine. This is one I bought the Illo and the Moleskine for my own personal use as well. And this is the A4 size. Again, true Moleskine fashion, bookmark, well-crafted elastic closure. You open it up, has a spot for the information. Nice cream-colored paper, very, very smooth. It maybe has like the slightest hint of tooth to the paper. Great stitching on the inside of here. Lays flat everywhere. Just fantastic. Good number of sheets. The paper is got enough thickness to it. It's got a pocket with a history of Moleskine back there. On to the testing. The testing, I mean, everything worked pretty well. I mean, fine liners worked great. Again, like all of these, the Oto graphic liners bled, so I would not recommend the Oto with this. Now, the Noodlers, if you're a fountain pen sketcher, or this worked great. The Noodlers Bulletproof Black with this worked amazingly. Ultra Draw bled. Everything else worked really well as far as the drawing inks. The Speedball Super Black had a little bleeding on it. The Fude pens worked really well. My Vortex wash there worked well. The Copics worked beautifully on this, but you do get some spreading, some feathering from the line. So make sure to color well within the lines because it will bleed out to the edge of the line. And the watercolor, it does have a little bit of this like freckling to it, but it's light washes will work in this. As you can see, the Copic did bleed through the page, so definitely have a page behind it. The watercolor sat nicely, and none of the ink is really showing through that much on the paper. So it works really well. It's a good sketchbook. It's a Moleskine. I mean, it's pretty much a classic. Now, working with nibs on this, the paper surface isn't as durable, but we're going to save that for the end. We'll talk about the nibs use in this at the end. Now, for the Illo sketchbook, the one that's the most popular friggin' thing on YouTube, which I don't know. It's just so friggin' popular on YouTube. Everyone and their mother has one, and they're making some money off from these YouTube influencers, let me tell you. When we open it up, nice square design. It's aesthetically pleasing. The cover's kind of got this rubbery texture, which it just pleases my hands to rub. The paper is super smooth, nice and bright white, and it's got a pocket, which admittedly, because of how close, it's a huge pocket, but how close they put it to the inside binding edge makes it a little difficult to open sometimes. Now for the test page. Now, this worked pretty well with everything, but it did the worst at the watercolor performance. There's a lot of this freckling kind of texture that shows up between the light and the dark. And I believe that has to do with the inconsistencies between hardwood and softwood paper pulp distribution through it. So you actually have lighter sections, which is hardwood pulp, that's not as absorbent, and then the darker sections is the softwood pulp in the paper that's absorbing more of the pigment. But Copics worked relatively well. It did bleed through, so obviously put a piece of paper. But all the inks went down pretty well on it. Speedball Super Black worked well. Ultra Draw ink did bleed on it, and the Oto graphic liners did bleed, but everything else worked really well. And again, this is another one of those that the Noodlers Bulletproof Black worked fantastic in it. So another one, if you're a fountain pen sketcher, this will be your friend. I really do like bright white paper, so that's what really drew me to the Plum Chester and the Illo. But as far as bright white paper goes, I think I'm gonna have to stick with Bristol on this one. So I know this is a long video, but I really wanted this to be a product comparison, that if you're choosing a sketchbook, if you're looking for one of the various sketchbooks available for your use this coming Inktober, these are like the top sketchbooks out there available. So what would you choose? Well, the first comment I want to make is, do you really need a sketchbook for Inktober? And the answer I'm going to say is absolutely not. No, it's only good for one thing, and that's if you want to keep all of your artwork together in one place and you don't feel like putting it into a portfolio, because it's easy enough to go buy a cheap, portfolio where you insert the pages into it and just use that for every Inktober. Just buy a new one and just put 31, get the clear sheets and like a 3-ring portfolio, get the clear sheets, stick your artwork in that and be good with it. But if you want a sketchbook, something tangible, hold a book and be like, here's my art for Inktober and I'm going to do a flip through, then you're limited in options. And these are really your options. You have the two big dogs of the sketchbook game right now, which is your Moleskine and your Illo. And then you have some of the other ones. You have the Travelogue, the Plum Chester. There's some other ones out there, the Leda Art Sketchbook. There's some options out there. But my final thoughts are, if you want the best performance, use the materials that you know and you currently use for your artwork. That means I may just use Bristol, the normal Bristol that I use every day in my normal work. I may just use that for Inktober. But if I want to use a sketchbook, going with something that I already know and use, a Bristol sketchbook is a fantastic option. It is probably my number one recommendation. Get the Koh-I-Noor hidden wire sketchbook, the Bristol Smooth, if you are a person that is inking with a nib and work on Bristol commonly. If not, if you're a fine liner person, this is still a great option. It's a super thick paper, and if you like Bristol, you'll love it. But let's say you're a fine liner person, maybe a little bit of dip pen work, and you definitely want a traditional, nothing spiral bound, traditional sketchbook. Well, the Plumchester, you can forget about it unless you're going to do primarily pencil, because it does not hold an ink line very well, despite saying friggin' Inktober on the front of it. So that leaves you with these four options. So these two, between the Moleskine and the Illo, do you like the square format of the Illo, or do you like the portrait of the Moleskine? Do you like bright white paper versus do you like a cream colored paper? That should be your decision making there. That's about the only difference between the two, other than like the surface texture of the cover. Now, so that's that. It's just, do you want the brand recognition of Illo or Moleskine? And they did work really, really well. But the top two performers that came out of this were the Travelogue and the Leda Art Supply. And it comes down to, for me, do you like more tooth on your paper, or do you like smoother paper? Do you like thicker paper, or do you like thinner paper? Now, that paper is honestly about the same thickness. There's not a lot there. They're both cream-colored papers. It's just hardcover versus softcover, texture versus non-texture. Both performed extremely well in the inking tests. So that's where it really stands. Do you like bright white paper? Go with the Illo. Do you like cream paper? Then you've got the Moleskine or these two. If you care more about fine liners and want a robust notebook, go with the Moleskine. If you're going to be doing more watercolor incorporations, go with the Travelogue. If you just want an all-around sketchbook that you can use with pen and ink and aren't going to be doing a lot of Copic or watercoloring, go with the Leda Art Supply. Unfortunately, it is not hardcover. They may make a hardcover one. I honestly really don't know. I'm going to link this particular one. I really do like the feel of this, the soft cover. There's something I really like about the feel of it. And if you have a hard surface to work on, it still does work great. The only downside, like I said, is the first few pages, if you're left-handed, are going to be a pain to work in. Or even when you're working on this side, as you can kind of see. And then as you near the back of the book, because it is a soft cover, there's really not much support in this section of the page. But the paper held up great. Either way, if you go with the Leda, or you go with the Travelogue, or you go with the Illo, or you go with the Moleskine, you're not going to get Bristol performance, but they're all good options. And it's just, be careful about the nib usage on all of these. The surfaces aren't durable. If you really want to do a lot of pen and ink with a nib, your only real option, sketchbook-wise, that I'm showing here is going to be the Koh-I-Noor Smooth Bristol Hidden Wire Sketchbook. So hopefully you guys found this a little more informative and insightful for choosing a sketchbook for Inktober. Personally, am I going to use the Koh-I-Noor sketchbook for Inktober, or am I going to use my typical Bristol? I don't really know yet. Am I even going to fully participate in Inktober? Man, every day's Inktober. All right, that's just me. But we'll see how it goes. Hopefully this helped you narrow down your decision for a sketchbook for Inktober for 2019. As always, guys, like the video if you liked it, dislike it if you disliked it, and leave a comment in the comment section below. Make sure to subscribe. Thank you, everybody, and have a great Inktober. And I hope you had a great September. Thanks, everybody.